TIFU by messing around and discovering a classmate is pregnant. For context, I am a med student into my second year of med school. Today we had a urine lab, and for the vote of confidence, my professor decided it would be much appropriate for everyone to bring their own urine. So everyone had their urine in front of them in the container. And we were doing several tests, making slides, microscope, testing for glucose, ABCs, etc. So on the central table. So after doing all my tests and recording them in my journal, I thought it would be fun to mess around. There was a pack of pregnancy strips. I do not know why the heck these things were there in the first place. So I thought literally nothing and picked up the strips and started reading the leaflet. In the meantime, everyone was done and they saw me. I do not know why we all had the same idea, and all 15 students picked up a strip and mindlessly dipped it in the urine container. As expected, nearly all of them tested negative. All but one. I cannot describe the horror on that girl's face. Like, it was really horrified. She just without thinking took another strip and tested again. Still positive. She ran out of the lab rather very visibly upset. Me and the other classmates were really awkwardly staring at each other and trying to understand what happened in this turn of events. Had a routine urine lab in med school. Started messing around after getting work done. Everyone took a pregnancy test and one turned out positive. I am reminded of a story about science teachers no longer offering to do familial blood typing. Guess what? You aren't your dad's kid. For the same reason, when I went to curriculum night at my kid's middle school, the 8th grade science teacher told the parents, if your child is adopted and doesn't know, tell them, because they will find out in science class this year. I found out I was adopted when I was 10 or 11. Both my parents are white. I am Japanese. Was not the smartest kid ever. My 9-year-old doesn't believe me when I tell him he is adopted. We read all the age-appropriate stuff. Explains it the way you're supposed to at each age. Show him pictures of his foster family before us. Everything. He came home from 3rd grade genetics lesson telling me I am wrong. He is dad's kid because they both have brown eyes. We are white. He is Korean. Oh man, that poor girl. I had to take a pregnancy test to undergo surgery the other week. I mean, I knew I was not pregnant, but I was still so relieved when it came back negative. This reminds me of the story my sister told me. She was training to do sonography. They were on the pregnant unit. Had a pregnant lady come in. The professor stopped and moved on to the next subject. The pregnant lady was a classmate's friend. Turns out the baby died. Reminds me of a girl I know training for being an ultrasound tech. They obviously practice on each other. Partner practicing on her is like, that is a baby. And that is how she found out she was pregnant. When I was still attempting my chemical degree, this was one of the reasons we weren't allowed to use material from our own body to research on for lab classes. We could submit a request for stuff like pee, blood, tissue and such to get it from her other source. Maybe you did her a favor. I mean, it is horrifically public and embarrassing. But at least she knows now. And early enough to have time to make an informed choice about what to do. Yes, I was going to post something similar. It is a bit of an embarrassing situation for sure. I understand how you feel, TIFU, as a result of feeling embarrassed on behalf of your colleague, but it is not a FU in my book, and you did not FU by doing the test and having others copy you. If you were wondering, I wonder how those pregnancy test strips came to be there. If they were not part of the learning outcomes, I wonder if the powers that be put them there so that a pregnancy test could be made easily accessible. Who knows if Weil had not been messing around with those pregnancy tests. It might have been much longer before she found out. And then she had to have fewer options, less time to prepare. I remember in JR9, I think 14-15 years, we were studying genetics in class. One of the bright girls calls the teacher out on some fact that has to be wrong. I forget the tray. But she had it, her parents did not. The teacher argued with her for a couple minutes, then his face went kinda white. He said he'd look into it and discuss it with her after class. The course then took a 90-degree turn and we started the physics lab. Being interested in genetics but not as smart as her, it took me a little longer to figure out she had to be adopted. Now that consumer DNA testing is a thing, I know it is very common for kids to make it to adulthood without knowing that they're adopted. Or even how common switched at birth really is. but an 83 for this was a school-wide scandal. It's not like you went around and tested everyone's sample. You only did yours and everyone else decided to follow your lead. She also decided to test it twice. She could have played it off had she only tested it once. Must be a faulty test because I am on birth control. Or that is weird, maybe I should go to the doctor. Then she could have confirmed the actual test in private. And if anyone asked, said it must have been a false positive, etc. Now everyone is reasonably sure she is pregnant or has some sort of medical issue. Lecturer once casually announced that they do not let us to look at our own chromosomes anymore because the time to discover that your chromosomal sex does not match your gender is not in the middle of a lab skills assessment. About 1 in 700. Apparently. So about 1 every 2 years in my uni. People think numbers like that are super rare. Until they get a solid example. Like that one. On average. Every 2 years. They would have a genetically intersex person in that class. And that is not even the only type of intersex that occurs. My wife's roommate was a med student in an ophthalmology rotation when she found out that she has a major optic nerve issue or some other eye issue that will affect her later in life. Since she is now a neurosurgeon, there were also several students in the graduation class that got married, had babies, and all got divorced during school. Life happens. I took most of my AFI classes with the same teacher. Save for the last semester. I ended up with an accelerated course for the last one and, funny enough, half of that class wasn't new to me. That is how good the teacher I wanted was. Anyway, new teacher walks in one day. We were planning on doing fetal pig dissections. The labs were on the other side of the building, well away from our classroom. She walked in and sat down at her desk, which was directly in front of my table, and let out a big forced breath. Man, those pigs stink. A few people laughed and I raised an eyebrow at her. You can smell it from here. Yeah, they're really ripe. Do you normally have a really strong sense of smell? Because that could be a sign of. The look on her face cut me off. I didn't want to say it because cultural norms, etc. Nothing more was said until the last week of class. She came in beaming, sat down, and looked right at me. You were right. I tried asking her what she was talking about, but she just winked and waited for the whole class. Then she explained that her and her husband had been trying for quite a while. She had a few miscarriages. So when she went home that day and took a test, she wanted to give it a few weeks to see if it would take. I didn't keep in touch with her but have always hoped that she and her husband got their little bundle of joy. Happened to me. Worked in a hospital lab. Just messing around. Submitted a urine sample. Later the tech calls me over to show a bright blue circle on the thingy she was holding. The whole staff was aware. Of course. Repeated it. Same. Yikes. Not happy news. In my undergrad microbiology class, we all swabbed the inside of our mouths. Swiped on a petri dish. Let it sit in the incubator for a week. The learning part included identifying the common bacteria that is found inside mouths. A classmate had some weird spots on his dish that nobody else had. The teacher was embarrassed, but when everyone insisted to know what it was, and the student consented it be revealed. The spots were a bacteria commonly found in women's vaginal canal. I guess you mean Candida. It is a completely normal fungus, not a bacterium, present all over literally everybody's bodies, with high numbers on mucosal surfaces like mouth, intestinal tract and vagina. A pretty common condition is called candidiasis, also known as thrush or yeast infection, where Candida wildly increases in number and starts causing trouble, which most commonly occurs in mouth or vagina. It looks like white spots or layer, often together with some redness. It can be caused by literally a million different factors. Most commonly because immune system is weakened for one of many reasons, could be just prolonged stress or anything up to an advanced HIV infection, antibiotic use, corticosteroid use, a very commonly used group of drugs, pregnancy, etc. Basically all babies will develop a thrush that will resolve itself pretty quickly. It is also more common in older people, diabetics and people undergoing chemo. Yeah, urine can be fun. A friend distracted one classmate while I tossed a packet of sugar in his urine and gave it a good stir. He was overweight and we wanted to tease him that he had diabetes. Sure enough, the test came back crazy high. Laughing. He panicked. We confessed. He was relieved. Except after the class was long over, I realized that sugar, the stuff we added to his urine, is sucrose and the test is for glucose. So when the test was positive, it was reading glucose, not the sugar we added. He really did have diabetes. He later died of a massive heart attack. Always sort of wonder if that was partly on me. My husband needed a stem cell transplant for leukemia. Both his sister and brother were tested as possible donors. We were told there is only a 25% chance one of them would be a match. All we got was a message from the doctor that neither of them were a match. When we asked later on if either of them were a 50% match, since none of the 25+ million on the worldwide database were a match either, they told us they couldn't reveal that info. Turns out they learned their lesson several years ago when they used to routinely provide results, and many SIBs found out they didn't have the same parents. My undergrad microbiology professor, who was my research advisor at the time, once told me a story along these lines. It was the classic micro lab where you learn light microscopy technique and how to properly fix a sample onto a slide. The typical sample is taken by using a cotton swab to grab some cheek cells, oral bacteria, etc. by scraping the inside of your cheek. He had a microscope with a camera attached for the demonstration. So he asked for a sample from the student closest to him. They swabbed their cheek. Then he fixed the sample onto a slide and put it under the microscope. Once he got to the 40x objective lens, it was pretty obvious the student had a good amount of sperm in her sample. And it was projected in front of the whole class. Needless to say, he never repeated that particular demonstration the same way. If you're gonna go down on someone before an intro microbiology lab, don't let them finish in your mouth. Had a similar experience when in nursing school. The class was mostly female. I think we had to find out they were knocked up. A couple with yeast infections. And quite a few who had sex the night before. On the upside, we got to see live sperm under the microscope that day. It is not the right context for the type of news. But she chose to do the test and she found out very important information early. If she had not taken the test, she would still be pregnant. It sounds like she was not planning on taking the test, and it is information that is best to have as early as possible. This is not an foo on your part, in my opinion, even if it turned out badly. As an adoptee, I really appreciate the discussion happening in this thread. Love learning more about other adoptees' experiences. As a woman, I do not think you act up. I think you did her a favor. It sounds like she would not have found out until a bit later, and well, if she is in medical school, she is probably not aiming to have a kid right now. She has some tough choices to make and she needs all the time possible to make them. I mean, it is gonna happen when people are doing medical tests on themselves. Sometimes you discover things. Imagine if you were a dude and you test positive for the urine HCG and it turned out it is an ectopic tumor. Or you discover microalbuminuria and you have got kidney damage. Maybe it'd be better to test your own samples in private. I am a med lab student and our professors frequently let us run our own samples all the time, so constantly worried something like this will happen to us. We get to type our own blood at the end of the year, and my professors said that one year, a girl found out that her dad wasn't her biological father due to their blood types not matching up. Apparently the girl's dad had died when she was very young and her dad stepped in and raised her as his own, so everything turned out fine in the end. Still got to be a jarring thing to learn during school though. You should read some of the stories from genetics classes in high school. Even just learning about blood types can accidentally expose that a child is adopted or the product of an affair. While stressful for everyone, especially the poor young woman in question. This was not your FU. This is a learning opportunity for your teacher and your uni. Better to be working with anonymous and randomized samples even in the most basic of classes. You could have all collected from a relative, or yourselves. Then done a simple double-blind system just in case any life-threatening results came up, and it would be either suitable for the lecturer to unblind themselves and get in contact with a resentee, or perhaps the entire class could be told about the result, and it'd be left to everyone to follow up with private testing. Either way, this is also an interesting opportunity for a class on ethics in medicine and medical science. I am sure an ethicist would remind you that telling this story anonymously on the internet is fine. But discussing the incident with students that go to the same university as your class risks people guessing who it is and knowing her private medical status. We did the science with your urine in a class once. And during the slides under the microscope part, the girl next to me very loudly asked, "What are these things?" The professor had a microscope at her table in front that was connected to an overhead projector. So she said, "Bring your slide up and we will take a look." So projected for the whole class to see became the video proof that this girl had recently had the sexy time. Cause it was a fairly large number of dead spermatozoa that she had not been able to identify. Pretty much everyone knew what it was a human biology class after all. The professor quietly let her know what it was. At which point this poor girl turned bright red and sat back down. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.